Hey, it was great, y'all. This is Antonio Ortiz, aka Copycat DeCray, and I'm here today with a special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Kaden.
We're going to touch on some conspiracy stuff
All right, I dig conspiracies.
and my favorite stuff, spiritual things and how
Yeah, always good.
how the mind works and this and that.
hmm
Anyway, so Kaden, what's some of your background? Like what have you actually researched and studied into?
Yeah, so for me in particular, a lot of my knowledge on human psyche comes from like a very good proportion of my life has been spent in therapy and in the environment of mental health, that type
Okay.
of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm well educated in it through experience, vicariously through my um, interaction with this world. I have become knowledgeable on the particularly like how trauma affects the brain and
Yeah.
bettering yourself. I actually spent a bit of my life when I was younger in residential treatment and hospitalizations and that type of thing. And so a lot of my life has been uh, becoming a healthier person and understanding what it takes to be a healthier person spiritually, metaphysically, and mentally, and living within your own world and that type of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Ain't nothing wrong with that, man. All my occult knowledge and whatever, it just comes from me studying and,
Yeah.
like you said, just going through it myself.
Yeah, and I was actually raised pagan. I lived with my grandmother for 5 years of my life in a kind of transitional phase, and she is very has a lot of different influences in her spirituality, but particularly like um, paganism and like Eastern medicine and that type of thing. She's always been very heavily into, and so I was also raised around that kind of occultist, I guess you could say, type stuff.
Yeah.
So that's always been an interest of mine as well, and I actively participate in like Wicca and other just spiritual connections that wouldn't particularly have a really big meaning to other people, but I believe that if you have your own personal like meditation or mantras or
Yeah.
whatever you focus your energies into, whether you call it God or you have an ancestral spirit or whatever it may be, that is just as powerful as any other religion or
Hmm.
spirituality.
Yep, definitely, man. I'm all about, finding your own path, creating your own path, because hell, even if you look like in the Bible, Jesus says that, you have your own way, you'll do
hmm
more great works than he did. Yeah, you were talking about past experiences. Have you had any kind of past phenomenons happen? Have you ever encountered any kind of ghost or extraterrestrial thing that you like to talk about?
Yeah, actually, I don't surprisingly generally talk about my sort of paranormal experiences just because they're not generally openly received.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I do actually have, I guess, and this relates back to personal spirituality, that type of thing, a sort of spirit that I have been connected with, that I've been connected with for probably 7 years now.
Okay.
Um, I actually first encountered it when I was like 11 or 12. And so going on through my formative years, I guess, I've always had sort of this connection. I it and it's not me alone, actually. My significant other also, at this point, since we live together, very much believes in this entity. And it was actually a very unfriendly spirit at first. And over the years, I have kind of acquainted myself with it and learned that not necessarily an evil energy or a bad energy, but
Yeah.
one that is not bound by that sort of morality. And I have, since started making like offerings to it. I have an entire altar that is set up to it.
Okay.
And I do believe that it has like the ability to affect kind of like on a metaphysical level my life and things that go on within it and like dreams and luck, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
um and yeah, when I was younger, I would experience it during episodes of psychosis, just like a presence, and slowly it became more familiar and less of an intimidating presence and more of a comforting one. My closest friend, she uh, also has experienced it. We usually experience it when we're having like a negative time, whether it is drug induced or otherwise. And it usually shows up as kind of a comforting aura and just surrounding protectiveness, that type of thing. But with that protectiveness, it also will sometimes be more aggressive towards people it doesn't necessarily like or enjoy in the home. The closest kind of spirit that, like, because there's a bunch of different types and depending on like cultures and that type of thing, but one that is broadly throughout the world is like jinn. And
Yeah.
so its behaviors most closely relate to that of a jinn. And so the way that we pay homages to it and give to the altar and that type of thing are usually in that sort of general practice of how you would approach
Yeah.
a jinn.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of. Yeah. I understand that whole situation with a, just like you said, an entity, energy, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever people call it, is always an offering, and it can impact your life.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, like you said, there's no good and evil. That's just some kind of our own human restraints.
Mm-hmm.
It basically reacts. So you said it reacts like off people's energies. Like, does it
Uh-huh.
ever give you like, this person's not for you, or this person isn't, like, it doesn't like the vibe of certain people?
Yeah. I actually because it's such a personal connection that I've had for a long time, I actually have like the sigil that I created through like sigil work through
Uh-huh.
kind of like letting that flow through. But and so it to me personally represents like a sort of protective spirit and sort of like a guidance almost.
Okay.
And so, yeah, when and I don't know how much you believe in all of this stuff and that, but when I feel more of a stronger presence of this entity, it usually manifests as like a numbness in my ring and pinky fingers on both hands. And so usually if I start to feel the physical sensation of the presence, then I assume that there's something going on that I should be aware of. And that has happened with like particular people or situations arising that I later was like realized were making me uncomfortable or led to something that was not an ideal situation. And I have since learned to kind of acknowledge that even if it is maybe a subconscious understanding of what is to come, or if it is like a third party kind of interfering and letting me know that things aren't perfectly right,
Yeah.
that it is something that I should pay attention to and take the necessary actions to um, get a grip on my surroundings, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm totally into all that, and I haven't personally had too many entities come in my presence. I've had
Hmm.
few experiences with it, but not as strong as the one you have. So,
Yeah.
on top of that, has it ever like revealed any kind of form to you, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So, particularly in my psychosis and when I've been on like psychedelics and that type of thing.
Mhm.
And it's also revealed itself to other people that have come into my life that I am close with, who spend a lot of time around me, who spend time in my house. They have seen typically kind of like a very tall, shadowy figure, which is why most people kind of assume that it's evil or dark in nature, is because it
Yeah.
manifests as a very kind of like I guess sleep paralysis demon is what most people would call it. But
Yeah.
the vessel that I have ended up associating it with is this coyote skull. I have several skulls that it can like have as a kind of home, as a resting place. A lot of spirits
Yeah.
enjoy kind of like, I on my altar there's a boar skull with lots of flowers and
Okay.
other crystals and that type of thing that you know not only are aesthetically pleasing, but would be appealing to a spirit.
Yeah.
And so, the general manifestation, though, that is seen most often in the circle of people who are familiar with this spirit is tall, shadowy, and with the coyote skull and the sigil on it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Just like you said, anytime someone associates an entity, it's always going to be some demonic shit. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
people need to get over it. It's not there. Like it, like you said, it's not good or evil. It's
Mhm.
just a presence, and if you pay any attention to it, give it an
Mhm.
altar, and it will help you. It's just all
Mhm.
how you perceive it. I really believe
Yeah,
on that
and
part.
entities definitely feed off of your spiritual energy. So if you're being aggressive, defensive, or scared, they're
Yeah.
going to feed off of that just as much as if you're being respectful and loving and kind.
Hmm.
And they will reflect that and give it back to you in its full.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Like, because even like with ritual work or per se, like people talk about the grimoire and they talk about invocation and evocations,
Hmm.
but yeah, you can't come into this with which I would call like baggage. Like if you're fucked up, like you have a lot of insecurities,
Hmm.
that entity will pick up on that energy and it will like feed off of that.
Yeah, it's a lot like any other relationship, honestly. If, you have to be kind of comfortable and knowledgeable of yourself before you can try and drag in any other sort of, other
Yeah.
party, because it'll rub off on, whoever you're around and it'll reflect in your relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And that's we're saying entity or like a person wise,
Hmm.
because you have a lot of people out here that can pick up on victim mentality and they will prey on you.
Hmm.
So people need to always be wary of what's going on around them. And like you said, you follow your intuition. And but yeah, so anyway, we're gonna move from entities. We'll talk more about how I guess how did you come into to knowing yourself to where you can trust your own intuition, because this is a big thing even now with like this whole corona
Yeah.
and people having to stay home and actually deal with
Hmm.
their own mind and shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I've fortunately have had a lot of practice with getting to know myself and becoming comfortable with myself, and it's never really a thing that I have 100% achieved, right? Like, it's always been kind of a back and forth and a
Hmm.
struggle, and it's something you have to work towards constantly. And if you slip up on it, you're going to relapse into your negative, habits. And for me, I grew up in a household where abuse was unfortunately a common occurrence. And so that also, in my developmental years, impacted how I was going to see myself from that point forward. And so, like I had mentioned previously, I spent some time in a residential treatment center, and I was young, but the thing is they basically teach you how to be a very high functioning and emotionally aware adult. It's about kind of learning to be comfortable within yourself, have that sort of self-respect to the point where you don't judge yourself in a way that you would, you know, you wouldn't judge other people. You wouldn't, assume that somebody is bad or horrible for taking care of themselves, and
Yeah.
you don't chastise people for struggling through issues, and yet we do that so much to ourselves, where we believe that we are bad for dealing with issues that oftentimes are out of our control. Um, I've had a lot of instances throughout my life that have challenged my, self perception, a lot of things out of my control. And so, a big thing for me has been kind of meditation, my spirituality, coming back to believing in the power of self and manifest destiny, and it's about mindfulness and awareness that you are human, and that everybody around you is human, and so you can't put such a massive amount of weight on yourself, because yes, you are the center of your own universe and you'll never be able to really experience it from another perspective, but also you're not the center of anybody else's universe. So
Yeah.
they're not as
True.
paying as close of an attention to you as you are.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, with the so how you're speaking of, it's struggle with it as well, man. It's it's not like it's always going to be some resistance because that's
Mhm.
just part of life in general. There's
Mhm.
always more to learn, and I've always figured out like I really don't know shit except that I'm actually
Yeah.
gonna die, and that
Yeah.
yeah, and that what's the other constant? That shit is always gonna change, and there's always gonna be some hurt. There's gonna be like basically like your seasons, man. You got winter, and then you
Mhm.
got spring, and then you got fall. So
Yeah. And it's funny that you bring up death, because that I've had several encounters with death from my own perspective, and as well as quite recently, a friend of mine who very close, very tumultuous relationship with a lot of past, um, you know, uh, considering suicide to such a heavy degree where he ended up calling me with like a gun to his head, and so that was a very shocking confrontation with death from somebody else,
yeah,
where we're constantly grappling with our own mortality, but when you think of it as somebody else's, it changes the perspective in a way that's kind of unexpected.
yeah, and yeah, I always say like I always see how we perceive the world is basically just a reflection of us,
Hmm.
and we always need to look at our surroundings and basically you can change whatever you don't like, and it like I said, it reflects everything back to you,
Hmm.
whether it be your relationships, the state of, your own home, like,
Mm-hmm.
or is it, cluttered or the
Mm-hmm.
dirty, like, and is you're your own macroverse, which you were touching on, like, we have to pay attention to ourselves. You have to be somewhat selfish, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, you have to look at other things going around and make sure you're
Yeah.
making your environment better. Like, it's
Yeah.
always that like I said, it's a friction thing, and you're always gonna have resistance. If you don't follow any resistance, you're just gonna, like, basically go, what is it, merrily down the stream, and you don't know where the hell you'll end up at.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
with that, how do you, like when you feel like something negative happens, something doesn't go according to plans for you, like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you do any self observation? How do you deal with that sort of friction?
Yeah. Um, it's funny. Um, all for a lot of my life, because of my experiences, people will oftentimes tell me how self-aware I am, right? And it's a kind of blessing and a curse to be able to separate your emotional side from your logic side, right? Oftentimes, when I'm in a emotionally challenging situation, um, I will recognize that either I'm getting too elevated or something that I have said has negatively impacted somebody, and now they're not only angry but they're also hurt, and it'll pull me back into this reality in which I know that my emotions are getting the best of me, because that's easy for anybody when they are in a situation which they are under duress. They're going to get into this elevated state. They're not going to be able to think as clearly. And
Yeah.
so I'll recognize that that's happening. And then it's about pulling yourself into a evaluation state where you can weigh your what is going on in your mind and why you think you're right, or why the other person is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and then you assess the other person's perspective, and it takes a lot of a willpower to be able to think, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this scenario from their perspective, I am the bad guy. And we love to make ourselves the bad guys until we think we're not wrong. When we think we're right,
Yeah.
we're never the bad guy. And so it's about forcing yourself into this outside third party perspective, making yourself kind of like the couples therapist of whatever
Definitely.
relationship this you're in right now, and being able to apologize
Yeah.
and listen, and being able to, if it's more of a you're blaming yourself and you're really hard on yourself because of something that happened, being able to pull back from that and be like, well, I'm dealing with this the best that I can, and I am not a bad person for struggling,
Yeah.
and I need to be easier on myself. And it's not always an easy thing to do, especially when you're trying to be apologetic towards yourself. It's typically easier when you're trying to be empathetic with another person. But if I am in a heightened state and I am or something negative has happened, that's generally the reaction. Once I get to a level where I believe that I am not in control of my actions anymore, I choose to take that step back. And sometimes it's physically taking a moment and sitting in the quietness and being aware. And sometimes it's more of an immediate reaction where you can just kind of switch it over. But, it's definitely something that has to be practiced.
Yeah. I just learned that whole, like you said, I call it the observation state. That's what I like to
Hmm.
call it, because, like you said, I'll start feeling something, and yeah, like you said, you do have to step back And it's really hard for anyone that's not, I guess, emotionally evolved in that way.
Yeah.
Or I call it emotionally mature, because I've realized like I've been like unstable with just my whole feelings, and I'm trying to working on it more. But I did learn the self observation and pulling out of a situation or pulling out of emotions, and kind of thinking to myself like, why am I, why do I feel like that, or why am I thinking like this? So yeah, it's definitely like a big step trying to get into that level. And what I found, like you said, the best thing to do that to get to that point is, you have to get into some kind of meditation, and maybe you have to, fuck.
All right.
All right, yeah.
I'm sorry about all this.
Nah, you're all good, man. Like I said, it'll give me some more editing,
Yeah, and it was doing
testing.
so well.
Yeah. But luckily, yeah, I know where we're at. All right,
All
I'm
right,
gonna
good.
get back into it.
Of course, yeah.
All right, so you were talking about observing your emotional state,
Mm,
and as well something that I like to call is being emotionally mature, because
yeah.
I've failed. Yeah, I've been failing in that department for a long time. But anyway, so when you were talking about I guess, how people react, and this is something I learned. Like, it was about different mind states. You have like an alpha, beta,
Yeah.
and I don't particularly remember it, but people are usually running around in a like heightened, almost reactive mode.
Mhm.
And as you were saying, they don't, like, maybe you're not listening or they're not listening, and everyone does like to think that they, are always right about some shit,
Mhm.
and that's just part of our egos. Which I know a lot of people talk about killing the ego and this and that, and you can't kill the ego, because that's what helps guide you through this world.
Mhm.
So you never want to kill your ego, because then people just take advantage of you.
Mhm.
But anyway, so with that, now I want, so like, how did you, I guess, find your practice on how to, take yourself into accountability? Because on my podcast, I do always talk about, you need to change yourself if you want to change anything else around you. You always have to come come back to yourself, listen to yourself, because at the end of the day, man, there's nothing in the external world that's gonna know what's best for you than yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I know you said you followed your grandmother raised you in a
Mhm.
pagan sort of environment, but like, what did it for you where you knew, like, okay, I know what's best for me? Because even me, like in my 30s, man, like I did not know this till maybe a few years ago,
Mhm.
which was something that was always like right in my face.
Mhm.
Like, how did you like actually know that this was the correct way? Like, what's best for me?
Well, I actually was borderline agoraphobic for a couple years in um my teenage years, and I dropped out of high school because of my paranoia
Mm.
and my depression. Um, and like it was to the point where going out on the porch to get the mail was a big feat for me. And At that time, I was also in a particularly unhealthy relationship. with a person who would, gaslight and tell me that I was like, stupid and
Yeah.
never good enough. And it was very damaging to my self-worth and my self-confidence. And it was a 2-year process, really. And um, it started out when I was very, very low point in my relationship with this person. Um,
Okay.
and I began kind of figuring out that I enjoyed not being around them, and I enjoyed not really being around a lot of people. And I started kind of venturing out a little bit more
Okay.
on my own. I would dress kind of the way that I wanted to dress, which was not coherent at all. It was like if I found a ugly shirt and a horrible like cardigan at a thrift store, I decided that's what I wanted to wear, even if it was like made no logical sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I would just go out and I would go sit at a park, and I would not have any sort of stimulus other than just sitting there, and it was incredibly overwhelming and anxiety inducing and terrifying to my core, but it was something that I was doing by myself and something that made me feel human.
Okay.
And it was my first step towards figuring out who I was. And slowly I began to do more and more things that I didn't necessarily understand why or what, but made me feel happy. If I found something aesthetically pleasing, I would get it, like, or anything like that. And if I found something interesting or intriguing, if I read about something, then I would look more into it and I would kind of delve into it. So that's how I was reintroduced to kind of like the occultist metaphysical stuff, is because it drew on stuff that I had been raised with, and it was a comfortable area for me, and it was something that I was like interested in, and so I looked into it more, even though my ex was not particularly supportive at all. And I started realizing more and more that I didn't need them telling me what I needed to do in my life, and what I was and was not capable of. I dropped out of college for this person, and so I kind of ended up, the last time that they wronged me, telling them that it was over, and that in a sick and very backwards way, they had taught me self-confidence again, because as I discovered who I was more and more, I realized that I needed somebody else telling me who I was less and less, and I needed them like not controlling me in that way. And so I didn't need the validation from an outsider. um, and I left, right? And I started hanging out with my other friends again. I started going outside more. I got a job again. Um,
Okay.
and it definitely taught me in that sense of how to not be dependent on other people. And it's something that I've carried into my current relationship, of being independent and not being with this person because I feel like I need to be with this person, but because I enjoy them in my life,
Yeah,
so
definitely. Like, yeah,
that.
definitely. When you're in a relationship, it should be someone that's going to help you build yourself up, not
Mhm.
your whole identity exists
Mhm.
because of that person. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's awesome that, you took steps and you followed them and just, and it seems like this, I don't know, it's a weird thing to me because I always hear like people talk about being tore down, and
Mhm.
I guess you can only be tore down so much to a point that at some point you eventually decide, I need to build myself back up.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's just, survival instinct or what, but we all have it. And it's definitely great that, people figure that out. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
it's entirely great that you have to be ripped completely to shit before you
Yeah.
decide, like, hey, this ain't working. But, but I
Yeah.
guess that's human nature sometimes, man. So, but yeah, if you're hearing this, like he said, it's small steps you got to take to build yourself up. And we don't all have answers or know
Mm-hmm.
everything. So always follow your own intuition with certain
Yeah.
things.
And there's no set path, which I think is something that's pushed in therapy and more like clinical settings of mental health,
Hmm.
is that if you take these steps, you will get better. And coming from somebody who's been in a lot of therapy since very early childhood, it's never a one size fits all
Yeah,
for mental health,
that
especially
path.
because mental health is so situational in many cases these days, that if something for you seems too drastic or too small, or anything in between, then there's other options. And the best thing that you could do really is discuss with other people who have had these experiences, and get that sort of input, and also take that look inward and kind of familiarize yourself with yourself, because quite often we forget that we have so many little clockwork pieces within us, and we just consider ourselves as a whole when we're walking around, going to work, buying groceries, that type of thing. We don't put
Definitely.
a lot of thought into our own psyche, and taking that look within ourselves can help us explain some of our behaviors and then begin to fix them.
Definitely. Yep. Always, you got to have self reflection. You got to basically just, I don't, like I said, once you get ripped down to a certain point, it's at some point you got to say, okay, I'm tired of feeling like this.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, external things just kind of reflect back through or help us perceive what's going on within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we should always strive to be better and look for little things that, like you said, because everyone's raised differently. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe me throw like one thing I can't stand about like my wife is when she leaves like towels on the floor. That just
Mm-hmm.
like that sets me off. It's like, come on, man, we gotta. They just
It's the
drive,
little things,
yeah,
right?
little tiny things like that. So, but anyway, but yeah, we all have our different perceptions of reality, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said, if a person's not helping you build yourself up or giving you something to build on, then yeah, they shouldn't be in your life. Period.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely a very hard thing to uh, grasp in certain situations with people who have
Definitely.
a like predisposition to codependency.
Yeah,
and and let's be honest, that's a lot of us,
yeah.
um,
We all fucked up, so let's just
especially
throw it out there.
especially when when a person has deeply ingrained themselves within your life and
Yeah,
become important to you. If they start to become a source of toxicity, or they do something that really hurts you, we are still hesitant to remove them because of this past that we have. And I'm all for second chances, but once it comes to the third time around, or even the fourth time around of this repetitive, like hurtful behavior, it you have to do something about it, because otherwise you're just going to this person's going to keep tearing themselves down and you down in the process.
Definitely, yep. And it's one of those, love, like you're the last person to see that this person was a piece of shit or whatever the situation is with it. But yeah, it's always what love is blind. And we do live, like, we live in three states. Like you said, we live in the past. Like, this person might have pulled us up when we were at our lowest or
Mm-hmm.
made you feel good. So there's that past experience, and then in the present, they're just not doing shit. But yeah, you still have that future mentality, like, well, this will work. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's definitely always a struggle
Yeah.
because when
And
you have your emotions and stuff all involved with it.
it's interesting. It's usually not the past that's keeping you in that scenario. It's the future. It's the fact that you believe there's this idolized like redemption arc where everything will turn out fine, and it's about understanding that that future uh, isn't always attainable, and if your present is as painful as you think it is, then regardless of what the future could be, you need to be healthy right now. That type of thing.
Definitely. So, all right, I'm gonna shift the talk up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to go into we were talking about the dependency thing, and I see a lot of that, like with religion, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people go to churches and they get told how they should be a good person and
Mm-hmm.
what makes a good person. And I always believe that, I don't need someone to particularly tell me that killing another human being is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
or stealing something from someone, especially when they worked really hard for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't I don't get, like, I mean, I get it that some people feel like they need religion just
Mm-hmm.
as a guiding point, but at a point, like, people become too dependent on it.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any kind of thing you can say or tell us about your experience with any kind of religion? Like, if you ever tried to get into one? Because me, myself, like, I've gone through, like, Nation of Islam. I've
Yeah.
gone through several phases.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I like, now as an occultist, I see the bigger picture and the message in all the religions,
Mm-hmm.
but you always got that one person that has, is trying to get either, they have other, what, I can't even think of the word, but they have their own motives where they're either trying to bait people for money or
Mm-hmm.
whatever thing they have going on, especially with cult leaders. But
Yeah. I was luckily raised very open. My mother believed that we shouldn't be forced into a religion. Once we were, our own adults, we would be able to decide if we wanted to follow a religion or not.
okay,
And so it opened me up to experimenting. And so my grandmother, of course, was had the paganism, and my best friend growing up was Jewish. So I had a lot of interaction with Jewish culture and practices.
okay,
And some of my family members on my father's side are like Mormon, and I actually ended up uh, going to a Mormon church a couple of times because I went through that period of faith seeking, believing that if I found God or whatnot, that
yeah,
I would be
have your
miraculously
purpose and all
yeah
that shit. Yeah.
happier.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I got to experiment with that, and I never really had this sort of connection that I would see these other people having when they were listening or,
Yeah,
testifying or whatever. Um,
definitely.
and yeah, I even tried. I've been in a couple covens as well, and I prefer self-practicing with people that I'm close to over just getting together based on religion, if that makes any sense. Because I
Yeah,
have a stronger connection with those that I'm close to, and so I feel like what we create in whatever meditation or ritual that we are practicing is more powerful. But yeah, I my dad, my maternal grandmother actually would sneak me out to church when I was very little and try and get me baptized because she didn't want me going to hell.
oh Lord, yeah,
Yeah.
that Catholic thing. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to We Are the Great Movement podcast. I'd like to thank Kaden for being my guest. We will definitely have him on again. And I will have all his links for his Twitter and Instagram. So be sure to check us out, follow. Have any questions, you can always leave a voice message on the Anchor app. And you can also reach out to me on any other social media platform. Sorry. Anyway, see you on the next one, guys, and always stay great.